but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Scott Rogers. I'm the chair of the West Central Wisconsin Rail Coalition. So if some of you are like me and you have lots and lots of Zoom meetings and you knew you had a Zoom meeting this morning, wondered which one it was, this is it. We want to thank you for joining us today, and just a few comments. First of all, thanks to Mark Quam, who is our Secretary Treasurer and our Zoom guru, and is kind of running things in the back end and set everything up. So we appreciate that. We'll remind you to keep your microphone muted so that we can not have any interference with background noise, etc. Up to you whether you're going to have your camera on or not. And then as we get started, we actually are expecting quite a good attendance this morning. And so if you do have questions or comments, primarily questions for me or our speaker this morning, I'd encourage you to put those in the chat, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. I'll try to look at them, and Mark, if you'll take a look at that too, and make sure if there's something that needs to be addressed, catch our attention, and we'll do that. Our plan is to be finished no later than 9 o'clock to respect your time. I'm going to start out with a little bit of an update on where we are with passenger rail service for West Central Wisconsin, our region. And then our guest speaker this morning is going to be Arun Rao from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. He'll give us an update on their project. So we're really looking forward to that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and just starting out with really some contact information here. I know we probably have some people joining us for the first time from the pre-registration list. So here's the address of our website. Today is the third Thursday of the month, and we do have monthly meetings on the third Thursday via Zoom. So we encourage you to have that on your calendar, and we'll continue to have updates in the future and valuable information for you. We also have a board of directors. It meets on the second Tuesday, so that's when we handle most of our business for the organization. I will mention that when you go to our website, there is an option of becoming a member. As an individual, it's $10. As an organization, it's $25. So it's pretty reasonable. If you want to be kind of tuned into everything that we're doing, you might find that useful to become a member. Our next meeting is coming up then on Thursday, May 20th. Lots of things happening in Washington. And so we'll, as usual, have an update on what our projects are. But our guest next month will be Jim Matthews. Jim is president and CEO of the Rail Passengers Association in Washington, D.C., and is very clued into what's going on there. And they've been a major force in working on forwarding passenger rail service in our country. Mark, by the way, is a member of the Council of Representatives at that organization, so we appreciate his service there. West Central Wisconsin Rail Coalition has a mission of providing leadership and coordination to develop passenger rail service through our region as part of a strategy to ensure a balanced transportation system for long-term sustainable economic growth. So the impetus in our community has been really the economic side of things, to provide transportation for our citizens and our businesses. And this is really the region that we're talking about, primarily the corridor from Eau Claire through Menominee, Baldwin, Hudson River Falls, to the Twin Cities. And really, that is even focused further in recent years, particularly before the pandemic, and it's really returning that we have a need to attract and retain talent in our area for the growth of our community and the growth of our businesses. Many of our business supporters have recognized that, and a Rail Credit Union, which is Jan Johnson from RCU as part of our organizing council, has indicated that having passenger rail service to our region certainly would be an advantage there. So really what we've concentrated on is trying to see implementation of things like the Wisconsin State Rail Plan, which its long-term plan has a route through West Central Wisconsin. The Minnesota Rail Plan, which includes Eau Claire to St. Paul as a phase one regional route. And as we've done that, we've tried to look around at the country at how other projects or other organizations have pursued passenger rail service successfully. We've seen station area development and the ability to have commerce around a station be an important thing. The Brightline service being developed in Florida is certainly an example of that on a completely private sector basis. Another mid-sized city, Normal, Illinois, where there's a state university, has been very successful in having development around their station that they developed a few years ago. And then we've looked around at commissions and authorities and others, locally based jurisdictions or sometimes multi-state, that have been effective or are doing things similar to us to obtain passenger rail service. So we looked at them and modeled some of the things they're doing as we pursued this effort as well. A few years ago, we put together our organizing council. Dave Christensen served as our volunteer executive director with a deep background in transportation planning, recently retired from Minnesota DOT, where he's involved in creating their state rail plan, and several other business people and others in our various sectors of the region. And they developed a business plan that envisioned working to get a self-sustaining Twin Cities to Eau Claire passenger rail service going 4 times a day, working on a public-private partnership with a private developer, operator, and marketer, a market rate access for the host railroad, which would be Union Pacific, pursuing value capture, transit-oriented development concepts. And what that means is taking advantage of the economic activity and value growth around station sites to help finance and operate the service, determining a governance structure, and then for startup costs, et cetera, being eligible for federal grant programs. We've been working with Corridor Rail Development out of Chicago, which has primarily been a finance and a passenger or a finance and rail car organization. They have a vision of being a more comprehensive passenger rail developer. Union Pacific has made substantial investments in this line and has been open to considering a passenger rail service along the line if they have a market rate access. And West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission has done a white paper for us, sort of to get the ball rolling on looking at that value capture concept. So we're looking at an auto-competitive, reliable travel time Eau Claire to St. Paul of about an hour and a half, 4 trips a day, several stations along the line, being able to take advantage of Wi-Fi, food and drink on board, being able to take bicycles, and of course, transit connections, particularly on the Twin Cities side as well as elsewhere. So the next steps really in our project have been to continue our work with Corridor Rail Development to complete a financial due diligence process with them and confirm an MOU with who does what. Union Pacific has asked us to complete an engineering study to look at capacity of the line, any capital improvements that would be required, and how it would work with their freight operations. And then really taking it farther to establish a local governance body to handle the public side of a public-private partnership. Also, part of our effort has been really to consider this phase 1, to start with this, but really to be able to look at passenger rail service serving our region to the east as well, particularly to Milwaukee and Chicago and perhaps Madison as well. So as we give updates today, really there's quite a few recent developments. A lot of times when people would ask me, okay, what's going on with the rail project, it seemed like we were giving the same update for a number of months. But we've actually had several things that have created attention lately and are important things that advance the project. One is developing the local governance body. And during the last few months, thanks to particularly the help with Eau Claire County in facilitating this with their administrator, Catherine Shaw, being involved, Corporation Counsel, Tim Sullivan, and one of our board members, Jim Dunning, who is a Eau Claire County supervisor. We have been able to move forward with the establishment of the Chippewa St. Croix Rail Commission. The counties of St. Croix, Dunn, and Eau Claire along the route, as well as the communities of Altoona, Eau Claire, Menominee, Baldwin, New Richmond, and Hudson have all passed enabling resolutions to say we want to be part of this and we will appoint representatives to get the ball rolling. So some of the purposes of that commission are to identify the public benefits of passenger rail service to our region, to facilitate initiatives to implement it, pursue opportunities for transit-oriented development, and then foster cooperation among different government agencies and others in Wisconsin and Minnesota to help move it forward. There's also the local planning that's important for this to determine and coordinate zoning, environmental safety, and other regulatory related requirements, and then to participate in current and future planning processes, both statewide and nationally. The commission held its first meeting on April 5th. We had representatives of all of those organizations. really some of the next steps. It takes a little bit of time to get something like this going. So we're in the process of helping commission members understand the issue. They'll be developing bylaws, and also the resolutions do call for there to be intergovernmental agreements among the parties. So as the bylaws are developed and the process of the organization gets started, they'll be going back to each of those entities really to affirm their participation and confirm who they'll have as representatives. The resolutions also actually did specify that the Rail Coalition would have 2 seats on that board. And at our last board of directors meeting, Ann Schell and I were appointed as the 2 Rail Coalition representatives. Ann, if you don't know Ann, has been until recently worked at West Central Regional Planning, was involved in coordinating the Gateway Corridor effort a few years ago here, and retired and agreed to stay on and be involved as a volunteer. So we appreciate that very much. So we have that as a positive development. Also, Corridor Rail Development, who we've been working with, we had a proposal some time ago from HDR, which is a consulting firm that was recommended by Union Pacific to take on the study that they have asked for. We met with HDR. They've given a proposal to do that contract. It's a cost of probably about $200,000, depending on what the actual work involves. Takes about 6 months, and Corridor Rail, Jim Costin, their president and CEO, confirmed within the last 10 days that it's their intention to go forward with Corridor Rail Development to ink a contract and move forward with that within this month. And so we're looking forward to that, and that's a very positive step forward. I think I already mentioned that it's probably about a 6-month process. So if we can move forward by early May, we're going to be looking at this fall, and that'll be an important piece of information moving forward on the project. Another positive development for service to the east, and really for service to our region of Wisconsin overall, is the Tcmc project, which is the second train on the Chicago to Milwaukee, the Twin Cities route, an extension of one of the successful Chicago to Milwaukee Hiawatha trains. And WSDOT and MnDOT and Amtrak envision there being shuttle connections to reach some offline communities, including Toma to Eau Claire and perhaps Menominee. And we'll have her run with us later during this meeting, and so we'll hear more about that. But that's another positive movement, and when that is implemented, you'd be able to buy a ticket from Eau Claire and perhaps Menominee that would take you to Toma, and then get on the train from there to go east. So this is a map of that envisioned service, including the shuttle connections. They're also envisioning connections to Madison and Rochester. So we have that as another. And then the Biden infrastructure plan. There are a lot of new things happening in Washington with the new administration. You probably recognize here Mayor Pete, who is now Secretary Pete, indicating that their expectation is that passenger rail service would be an important goal of the Biden administration, working with Congress. And in fact, the American Jobs Plan, which is the infrastructure plan, which I should mention has a long ways to go before it is enacted, but does envision investing in reliable passenger and freight rail service, and looks at spending, they're proposing $80 billion moving forward to do that over the next few years, over about the next 8 years. Related to that, Amtrak, the national passenger rail system, on the same day that the infrastructure plan was released a map they called the Connect Us Vision. And what they did was say, if this plan moves forward and there's investment in rail passenger service, here's a list or a map of many of the routes we would seriously consider moving forward with if we can do that with the states and localities. If you see that Wisconsin State Rail Plan map that I showed a little bit earlier, advanced planning does make a difference. In fact, that's essentially the tool that Amtrak looked at when they were looking at routes that already have some planning underway. And as you can see, the West Central Wisconsin route was included there. Amtrak spokesperson Mark and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Maybe you do, Mark. But anyway, he's their frequent spokesman. Indicated that really this isn't something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be driven by states and local metropolitan planning organizations and elected officials as to what goes forward. So those are a few of the updates, and let's see, we're going to have a run with us pretty soon. And Mark, actually, the way my screen looks, I can't tell if Arun has joined us yet.
I just looked at my participants panel, and he has not joined as of yet.
We were planning about 8:15, and I went fairly quickly through my updates. So I would be glad to answer any questions that anybody has, or if you have any discussion points, just go ahead. I see there is something in the chat. Oh, Kevin Brubaker is helping us. Magliera, did I say that right? So we're helping with that. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I do have a couple other things I can add. If anybody doesn't have any questions right now. All right, I do have a couple other updates to give you. So let me go back to my screen. A little bit more on the TCMC project. One of the other commissions that exists is the Great River Rail Commission, which is the communities between St. Paul and La Crosse. And they've been working to get that funding for the second train. They've had, working with their chambers of commerce, they have had forums in Red Wing and Winona that were well attended and have helped move that forward. And they do have a forum they just announced yesterday coming up on April 22nd next week, really focused on what's in it for the Twin Cities. So you might take a look at that and see what, if you are interested in sitting in on that, there'll be presentations and discussions of what that project is all about, where it is, and what needs to move forward. And it's kind of looking at the whole federal actions to watch. And I think it'll be helpful to have Jim Matthews with us next week, because it's always a little bit more complex as you get into federal policy than you think. One is that infrastructure plan. It should be noted that that is actually intended to be on top of the regular other things that communities or that the government would be doing in the transportation area. So that's really an additional investment in addition to regular reauthorizations, which would be really the next thing. The Surface Transportation Reauthorization needs to come up. It actually expired last year. They extended it a year. That's really the framework under which the U.S. Transportation Department funds things like Amtrak, gives it Amtrak the authority to do things and the other kinds of programs that they have. And then there's the actual money that the Congress gives to various programs, and that's called the appropriations process. The federal fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th, so there'll also be an appropriations process. And then we actually believe that there's another federal item coming up very soon. The Federal Railroad Administration has a Midwest corridor study, very high level, but looking at major routes. We expect that to show Chicago to Twin Cities as one of the top priorities nationally, and that study should be out soon. And then just yesterday, the U.S. Department of Transportation announced a new kind of grant called a RAISE discretionary grant. If you've known about the Tiger and Build grants in the past, this really replaces that. And it's a new $1 billion program that a maximum of $100 million from any state, but they're going to have that out here soon, and that'll be another funding source for some different kinds of programs. So that's a little bit of update. Bill Draves has a question in the chat about when would the Minnesota legislature vote on their $10 million. We know that there are several options for that to happen. The governor put it in his bonding bill. There's also been a bill introduced by the Senate president, who's a Republican from Winona, to fund it specifically. I don't know if there's anybody, I didn't look at the list, if anybody from All Aboard Minnesota might be on the, sometimes they join us for our call, but I don't know that I'm seeing anybody from there. I don't know if anyone else has any updates on Minnesota, what expectations are there. Run may know that too when he joins us.
This is Mark. I might just comment, the Minnesota legislature wraps up their legislative year sometime around what, May 16th, 17th. I think the goal would be to hopefully get things approved for a budget or whatever would need bonding, but of course that's always subject to change. But at my last All Aboard Minnesota meeting, I believe it was mentioned that May 16th, 17th is when the legislature would convene.
All right, and I do think I see Arun on the call, so we're going to turn things over to him, and I'm going to just introduce him here in a sec. Actually, a lot of you probably know Arun, but we do want to tell you who he is and thank him for being with us. He has Arun Rao from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. He actually has significant experience in transportation planning and policy with DOT. He's been with them since 2001, has been working in passenger rail since 2006. And there he's responsible for planning, policy, and program sides of intercity passenger rail. And he also has a very broad perspective. He's chair of the States for Passenger Rail Coalition. He's vice chair of the Midwest Equipment Pool Board. He's also vice chair of the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, of which I'm also one of the Wisconsin representatives. So Arun, you can go ahead and share your screen and we'll say hello. And we can't give you a round of applause without all turning our microphones on. So just pretend like there's thunderous applause, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So go ahead.
Okay, thanks so much, Scott. Wow, pressure's on, thunderous applause. All right, let me see if I can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see it on my screen here.
Yeah, if you want to start your slideshow, we're seeing everything actually.
Okay. Oh, for some reason, I can't see the slideshow start here.
Looks like it's next to animations at the top, if you want to try that.
Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks again. Great to be back here. I gave a similar presentation in January, but hopefully, I think we'll have a few updates here, especially as it pertains to the TCMC, which it sounds like you've been talking about a little bit this morning so far. Quick update on Amtrak services. The Hiawatha service is going to be returning back to full 7 round trip daily schedule on May 23rd, which is very exciting. We're excited about that. We're going to have some public awareness campaign going on to communicate that. And then, we are seeing ridership starting to show signs of coming back, especially around the weekend, which is as we expected, that we're going to see the leisure personal travel come back before the business travel. So with the reduced consist size, train set size, and capacity right now, we're seeing those trains maxed out often around the Thursday through Sunday timeframe. Right now, we're only running 3 round trips. So May 23rd, we'll be back at the full schedule. So that's very exciting. And then the Empire Builder is returning to full daily schedule, daily round trips on May 24th. So we're looking forward to that. And then a quick update on one of the projects we've had going on for a while now, and that's the effort to increase the Hiawatha to 10 round trips. We are still going through the modeling process and discussion with the host railroads on determining the final package of infrastructure, primarily in Illinois, to increase frequencies on the Hiawatha there to 10 round trips. So that is going well. We are getting cooperation from all parties, And I think in about 1 to 2 months, we'll have a much better idea on the outlook and next steps on that. We do want to get that ready to go if we can, given all of the potential expansion of passenger rail funding coming down the road here that we'll talk about in a minute. And the other thing is that we're already incrementally building this 10 round trips out, even as we finalize the infrastructure improvements in Illinois. And I mentioned these last time, but just very quickly, we have the Milwaukee Airport Rail Station expansion project that is going on now. It's going into 60% design, should be complete in about 3 weeks here. We've had a lot of good, it's been a good process. We've had good comments. It's fully funded, and we're hoping to get final design done this year with construction in the next 2 years, 22, 23. We had comments from Amtrak on this, where we had single elevators in each tower that you can see. So the project adds a second platform on the west side of the tracks, and you can see in the rendering there is a fully enclosed, essentially building with two towers with a fully enclosed bridge that's HVAC, everything, that is integrated and connected with the existing building. The original design had 1 elevator in each tower. We're now putting in 2 elevators in each tower, given it's an airport rail station, an intermodal station, and the ridership is quite high and growing there. And then we have a signaling upgrade in Milwaukee. Again, that's fully funded. These are all fully funded now. We are working on acquiring additional equipment on the Hiawatha service, additional new single level equipment manufactured by Siemens. This will supplement what's coming into service this summer and fall on the Midwest routes. The Hiawatha will get 1 set equipped this summer and fall, but this project will equip the other set, and also replace the old converted locomotive cab cars with new cab cars that have seating in them as well. And then we have the Muskego Yard Freight Bypass and Milwaukee Intermodal Station project, which is a pivotal project needed for any increase in round trips. And that's, we're preparing to start the final design process, finishing up the environmental now, and the preliminary designs. And again, that's also fully funded with an FRA grant. Next, we have the TCMC project, and I'll give a quick update on that. Again, this adds that daily round trip along the Empire Builder between Chicago and St. Paul, serving all stops, all Hiawatha stops and all Empire Builder stops right now. And it operates at the maximum speed of 79, similar to the Empire Builder. We are going to look at some areas where to see if there are some places that the maximum operating speed can be increased to 79 where it's not 79, to shave off a few minutes of the schedule. It does have a daytime schedule that complements the Empire Builder, about 4 hours away from the Empire Builder's departures. It does have a shorter travel time already than the Empire Builder, and that's primarily because of reduced station dwell times with this smaller regional train. And then reliable on-time performance due to the shorter distance and fewer railroads. And we've really, again, had broad support across Wisconsin and also Minnesota. Recently, there has been a lot of outreach on the Minnesota side. And as part of this, and I know I showed this slide last time, but just quick flash it here again. We have some connecting shuttles connecting to the TCMT to expand the benefit of it beyond the corridor. One of those is already in existence, Rochester Mayo Clinic to La Crosse, Amtrak station. But the Eau Claire to Toma is another key one that could be implemented. And that would be for, the Eau Claire region connections to and from Chicago. And I mocked up a conceptual schedule here with the shuttle times not bolded, and then the Empire Builder times are in bold, and the TCMC. And this is something that, you know, if there is interest and it's feasible, could even be started in advance of the TCMC with connections to the Empire Builder. Again, we've received 2 grant awards for the TCMC, the FRA Restoration Enhancements Grants, very important because it funds the first 3 years of portion of the first 3 years of operating support for the TCMC. So that really reduces the burden on the states to cover the operating deficit during the startup period. And then the CRISI grant for FRA CRISI grant for final design construction of the 5 railroad projects in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so Minnesota, let me see here. So Minnesota needs to come up with 10 million of that. Wisconsin needs to come up with 6 million match for that. We have 5 million committed from Amtrak. So we are eagerly watching what's going on in Minnesota right now in hopes they can secure that 10 million grant. The goal is to get this grant agreement with FRA going by September 30th, the end of the federal fiscal year, and then go right into final design so we don't lose any time on this. The progress to date is that the planning process is complete. The environmental documentation is completed. We're just waiting for the last steps from FRA that are going on now to finalize that. We have a host railroad that is very supportive of this project. CP Rail is very supportive. They're even advocating for it. And then again, we're ready to go into final design and construction as soon as the matches are secured. So the next steps are completing the railroad agreement, which actually could be done in the next couple of weeks here. They're being reviewed right now by the railroad, and that's a requirement for the grant. Secure the Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois agreements. Well, first Minnesota and Wisconsin for the construction matching fund agreement, and then Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois for the operating agreement, operating funds agreement, and then execute the FRA grant, hopefully in September of 2021. And service would start in late 2024. I'm going to see if I can bring up another document here related to the TCMC to show you that's sort of hot off the press. Let's see. Are people seeing a blue TCMC?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the new official project fact booklet intended for people to be able to use for outreach for the TCMC. You can see here the first, it talks about what the TCMC project is and what it does and some highlights. This is the corridor map. You've seen a similar map with the kind of different graphics showing the population access of the TCMC. Those different shades of blue there represent census tracts within 30 miles of a TCMC train station and 15 miles of a proposed shuttle connection. We also have a lot of other information of what's in that travel shed, as you can see down there across the bottom. And then this is sort of what TCMC means to different, the tourist destinations, small rural urban areas, universities, and students, and then quotes from key players there with more information in the green boxes on the right. And then a description of the benefits with kind of a focus on that community and economic development. And then, of course, the traveler and mobility benefit and the freight network benefits. These are the construction areas for the TCMC. Again, we have one project in Wisconsin in La Crosse there. That's a significant project. It restores the second main track through the La Crosse Depot area, and it also extends a yard lead into the CP's La Crosse yard. and it constructs a new platform at the La Crosse station. This also shows an important point about weekly gate down reduction in gate downtimes in Winona and La Crosse as a result of these improvements on the freight railroad. And then here is the capital costs and revenue and operating forecasts for the TCMC. You can see there the 12.3 million projects in Wisconsin. That's the La Crosse project, and then the other 4 projects are in Minnesota, and that's the 40.7. That's the total project cost. We have the funding splits there on the right. MnDOT 10 was WISDOT 6.5, Amtrak 5, and then the federal grant covering 32 million. And then below that is the revenue and operating cost forecast. And important to note here is looking at that table there, you have Amtrak's operating cost, 12.29 million. That's not the operating cost that needs to be covered by the states. That's Amtrak's operating cost to run the service. And then that's offset by annual revenue, ticket revenue, food and beverage. And then again, in the first 3 years, that's again offset by the federal restoration and enhancement grant that we received. And then finally, you have the state partner support required that would be split among the states. In the first 3 years, you can see it going up a little bit. That's because the restoration enhancement grant covers 80% the first year, 60% the second year, and 40% the third year. And so that's why you see that state partner support share going up gradually over the first 3 years. And then in the fourth year, we don't have the grant, but you can start to see the state partner support begin to decrease. And that's because revenues are increasing at a greater rate than operating costs. And that's what we're seeing in the Hiawatha. And we anticipate, and it's forecasted that that's what we're going to see here, that state partner support going down over the years as we grow ridership and revenue. And this is an interesting page because it summarizes the comments that we received. So we put a comment form, as I know Scott has communicated with all of you, on the WISDOT TCMC website and we did press releases and sort of advertised that in mid-March. By April 9th, we had received 3,825 comments, of which 84% were in favor or leaning in favor, 12% neutral, and 4% not in favor or leaning not in favor, or less in favor, I'm sorry. So overwhelming support, and that the number of comments was a pleasant surprise to get that much public feedback on a project like this. That impressed me. I wasn't expecting a number that high. And you can see there's a comment map that shows where the comments came from, and it's hard to see here, but the green are the in favor, blue are neutral, and the red were not in favor or less in favor. And then on the right, we have, these are quotes from the 47, just 3 quotes from the 47 letters of support that we received for the grant application several months ago, over a year ago. And then a few examples of quotes from the public there. So that is TCMC update. Next, so the Wisconsin Rail Plan 2050. I know we've had a update on that from our planning group, Diane Peony, last time. Again, just to reiterate, we anticipate in the summer or later in the summer, draft plan release publicly, and that'll have a 30-day comment period. You can go now to sign up for notifications for plan updates on the Wisconsin Rail Plan 2050 website. And then in late 2021, there'll be a final formal review of the draft plan, and there'll be another 30-day public comment period with public hearing. And then I thought I'd give a brief federal update because there's just so much going on right now, and try to make sense of it. So the American Rescue Plan, that was the 1.9 trillion that was passed. That's already been passed. That's what enabled the resumption of full long distance service on Amtrak. It also has enabled many of the states, including Wisconsin, to ramp up their state-supported service back to full service. So that was a key piece of legislation for passenger rail to get service going and on a stable footing here as we try to get back to normal. And then there we have the American Jobs Plan, and that is the infrastructure stimulus bill that has been proposed by the White House, and that you're probably all familiar with already. But that is the $80 billion for that is in there for passenger rail. That was announced a couple weeks ago. Amtrak quickly followed that with their proposals and their vision for passenger rail that I'm sure everybody has seen. And that included that route through Eau Claire between Minneapolis and Chicago. And then we have the Fasttac Reauthorization, and Congress is in the midst of working through that now. There were some pretty key hearings last week, I believe, and basically they're taking HR 2, which was the House's reauthorization proposal, otherwise known as the Invest Act. I hope I got that right, or the Moving Forward Act. I think Invest is within the Moving Forward, so this gets really confusing. But so they're using that as a base now to hammer out a reauthorization. So we're watching that closely. And then we have the FY22 White House skinny budget. This is the annual appropriations. And well, I should go back to the reauthorization, as a reminder that that bill that they're sort of starting from had significant funding for passenger rail and a program called the Prime program that was a new program for passenger rail where a lot of that would be going through. And it was again a very large increase. FY22, again, the White House budget, that includes $375 million in CRISI funds. That's pretty much a status quo number. And then and it also includes a 625 million approximately unnamed new discretionary grant program for passenger rail. We don't know too much about that, what the intent is there, and we're trying to get more information and can pass that along as soon as we can. But that was a very positive thing to see a new program like that proposed. And then and the other Fasttac programs were also in there, state of good repair and I believe restoration and enhancements again. And then we had the as Scott mentioned, the build, which is now called what is it called, Scott, again? Rise?
I think it's RAISE. I'm not sure what it stands for. It just
RAISE, okay. RAISE, the formerly known as Build, formerly known as Tiger, and that again, that has 1 billion. That notice of funding opportunity is out now, so everybody's going to be scrambling to get their grant applications ready by the deadline. And there is some plan. I think there is in that one planning set aside. And then We have the other FRA FAST Act grant programs coming for FY 21 here. Those are CRISI, again, state of good repair. Those should be following pretty quickly here off the heels of build. So we should be seeing those notices of funding opportunity come out in the next couple weeks. And with that, concludes the presentation. I can open it up for Q&A, Scott, or
Yeah. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. We'll try to ask them. Arun, it was good to see all those blue dots on that map, and there seem to be a lot of them from West Central Wisconsin. I will mention that the Rail Coalition was among those forwarding a resolution and a letter in favor of the grants, which were some of the ones that, in fact, I think if you go to the site, there's a whole list of everybody who commented in those grant programs. Also from our community, the city of Eau Claire County, and the Eau Claire Chamber of Commerce all had submitted either resolutions or letters in favor of that. So, all right, let's take a look. There are a couple questions. One of the questions, Arun, from Terry Brown, the 8-page document, the TCMC that you were showing us, how soon will that be released to the public, and how can we access that?
that should be released to the public this week still, so possibly tomorrow.
Okay, and so probably be retrievable from the website somewhere.
Yep, yeah, and I can send it out perhaps even before it's on the website. I think we're getting final approval today.
Good, and we'll communicate with our constituents and let them know about it as soon as it's available. If anybody else has questions, pop them in. Arun, I do have one question, just sort of looking at the numbers, the operating and revenue numbers, et cetera, for TCMC. I know that just before the pandemic, the Hiawatha had very high cost recovery of 85%, I think you had on your slide. And we know that probably the cost recovery of state-supported trains vary a lot around the country. It looked like perhaps these are relatively conservative numbers. It didn't show really much growth in revenue from the first year, and the cost recovery not quite as high. Do you have any thoughts on whether these are conservative numbers, or you think they'll be right on? And I know until it's operating, we won't know.
Yeah, I think these are very, very conservative numbers. These numbers come from Amtrak's forecasting, ridership and revenue forecasting, which their model typically does that for their state operating contracts and other things. And my experience with it when it's applied to things like this, that it tends to be on the conservative side.
All right. Any other questions that anybody has? Feel free to pop them in the chat, or let's see. Oh, here we go. Terry Brown is asking if you are seeing the ridership numbers on the Empire Builder. How well is it being filled across Wisconsin? And maybe even comment sort of what, I think you already said that you're seeing some growth in ridership on the Hiawatha.
Yeah, we periodically ask Amtrak if we can see the Empire Builder numbers, and so we're going to be doing that. But we don't get those regularly, since that is Amtrak's national network route and confidential and proprietary information. But when we ask, they do give us a glimpse at that. So we're going to be looking at that soon, but don't have any numbers on that right now. But the Hiawatha has been, with the 50% cap that Amtrak has on capacity due to the pandemic, that puts the number of available seats for sale on Hiawatha trains at around a little over 100, 115 or something like that. And we're seeing, beyond, the number is bigger than that. I think they're letting a few other people on the train. we're seeing numbers bigger than that on the on those days around the weekends. So they actually did add a coach car due to that 2 weeks ago onto the Hiawatha consist to accommodate that while we're still only at 3 round trips. Once we go out to 7, there'll be a lot more space, I think, and hopefully we'll see ridership gradually come back even more. But there are some very positive signs that we're seeing right now.
Okay, another question in light of the Biden transportation proposal and the timing of the state rail plan completion, how do you propose to adjust the plan should the Biden proposal pass with the 80 billion revenue rail funding?
I think the plan will fit with that. It's it's intended to be a sort of a comprehensive longer term plan. And so it similar to the Wisconsin Rail Plan 2030, I think any opportunities that president's proposal might bring, would be consistent with the plan. So I think the timing is actually pretty good with the planning process, because I know that Speaker Pelosi is saying that she wants she would like to pass that stimulus or a version of the American Jobs Plan by July 4th. So we'll see how that goes, but I think the timing is pretty good. We've got the Amtrak proposal out, and as Scott mentioned, we have the FRA Midwest regional rail plan coming out here very soon. Well, in the summer, I believe. So I think the timing is good with all these things coming together.
All right. Another question about the 50% cap. Is that ending when the Empire Builder goes daily? And I guess likewise on the Hiawatha trains.
I believe I can't speak for the whole system, but I believe there are some routes will be lifting that. Yeah, I don't have any more. I think we'll be getting we'll be finalizing that soon here, I think.
And I don't know, one of the questions on the 80 billion in the Biden jobs plan, how much do you know about how that might be allocated and available? It actually says rail and passenger and freight rail. And although Amtrak came out with a plan, presumably that means other entities besides Amtrak might be eligible, or is it too soon to know that since it hasn't been drafted into legislation?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I have seen some initial numbers of around 30 to 40, a significant portion of that for the Northeast corridor, but also a significant portion of that for the intercity passenger rail expansion outside of the Northeast corridor. So there is significant beyond what we've seen, even in the for the outside of the NEC, beyond what we saw in the Obama administration, with the ARA. So it will be an unprecedented level for sure, even for outside of the NEC.
Right.
For passenger rail.
Yeah, go ahead. I thought it was kind of interesting to read. I don't know how many people have actually followed the links and read the actual Amtrak fact sheet on the Connect Us plan. It's actually pretty short. It has the map and then one page. But the written information reads a little bit more like a marketing sheet, because it talks about why Amtrak should be your partner and that sort of thing. So presumably they're sort of selling the idea of working with Amtrak on some of those. And Ron, I might ask you sort of just a question about the relationship with Amtrak. We know that they're have put funds in. I know you mentioned they've committed some to the TCMC match. I believe some of the Hiawatha projects they have. Would you want to comment on WSDOT's relationship with Amtrak over the last 3 or 4 years? I understand it's improved somewhat, or what's the general nature of that?
Yeah, we actually have a very strong and good relationship with Amtrak, a very good partnership, and which is evidenced by their um, prioritizing routes nationally, and with the Hiawatha and the Tcmc um, in the top 5 both. And they have, and also evidenced by their funding contributions, 8 million to Muskego Yard, essentially to the Hiawatha expansion, and 5 million to the Tcmc. Also something that, in years past you wouldn't see very often from Amtrak, partially because of the financial situation that we're in. They're in a much better financial situation now, or at least pre-pandemic. So yeah, WSDOT has had a very good relationship with Amtrak all along, but I think it's gotten even stronger recently with these corridor improvement efforts. But it remains to be seen. I think with the any additional funding that comes federally for passenger rail, you'll see a good chunk of that going to the traditional route through USDOT to the states. And this is my anticipation, and then you'll see some going to Amtrak.
We both serve on the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, and I know in the reauthorization principles that we've approved as requested, among them is more transparency on Amtrak's cost accounting, and of course you're chair of the States for Rail Passenger group coalition. Is that still a concern in terms of the costing side of Amtrak's reporting?
Yes, yeah, that's still a concern, but that's something that the state's Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Commission, or SAPRC, which includes Amtrak, FRA, and the states, is working to. Amtrak is fully cooperating with that. I think it's a lot of things going into that. One is the complexity of Amtrak's APT system, and the ability to be transparent. There's challenges there, and resources as well. But the SAPRC is making good progress with all of those things and working towards that. So I think that's pretty positive. But you're going to see, in the SPRC principles, in authorization principles, and in the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Commission, that being reinforced by emphasizing that work that's going on now. But it is going well. I think it's going in the right direction. It may not be fast enough, or to the extent that everybody wants to see, but I do see some positive steps happening.
We are just about out of time, but we did have one other question come in quickly. If you could clarify what the PRIME program is, you referenced it under the White House skinny budget. Yeah,
that's essentially another discretionary grant program for passenger rail, 80-20, 80% federal, 20 state and local, but a much larger amount with broad eligibility for intercity passenger rail. One of the important things that the States for Passenger Rail Coalition and the Midwest Interstate passenger rail stakeholders across the board are asking for is formula funding for states, so that there's a predictable stream of funding for planning and even for some capital projects, in addition to these large discretionary grant programs, so that again there's predictability, and states can build their institutional capacity for passenger rail, and be better able to handle, you know, these expanded programs, et cetera. You know, the presence of a formula, a federal formula funding like we have for transit, you know, for example, FTA's 5311 program is a formula program, and that funds intercity bus. That, you know, that might leverage a state to be able to get another staff person to administer that program and build the capacity there. So that I think is a very significant and important thing, a piece of all of this. So hopefully that happens.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your being with us, Arun, and that was a very enlightening and useful update. And we've covered a lot of information in the last hour. We do post recordings of our meetings, and I did put in the chat the link to our YouTube channel. Of course, this one won't be there yet, but our last two meetings with Rick Harnish from the High Speed Rail Alliance and John Robert Smith from the Transportation for America are posted there if you want to go back and take a look at those. And just reminding you that mark your calendar for Thursday, May 20th. We'll have information on our Facebook page soon on how to register for that meeting. That'll be by Zoom again. And we'll have Jim Matthews, President and CEO of the Rail Passenger Association in Washington, with us today. So let's give Arun a virtual round of applause in your own offices and homes. And we appreciate your being with us today. And have a wonderful day, a great weekend, and hopefully happy travels for those of us who can travel by train. Thanks much.
Thank you.